A father and soccer coach heading to his high-profile job in the city. A busy mother of 4. A web designer, an educator, and a world-famous actress. Like some 400,000 other Americans, they have multiple sclerosis, MS. But it doesn't define who they are.
It's something that you have, but it doesn't have you.
Terry Garr is sharing her experience with multiple sclerosis, along with other patients and doctors who are experts in treating this condition. They want to help you start learning how to manage multiple sclerosis, so you can move forward with confidence. She has been in some of the world's favorite movies: Young Frankenstein, Close Encounters of the Third Kind, Tootsie. Her career spans almost half a century. But for many of those years, Terry Garr struggled with symptoms that were difficult to define.
A long time ago, maybe 25 years, when I was doing Tootsie, I would run in the park. I lived in New York, and I would run around and start limping a little, and then I didn't know what it was. And my friends would point out to me, you're limping. I'd say, I don't know why.
It wasn't until many years later that Terry was found to have multiple sclerosis, and she started to learn what that could mean to her future as an actress and as a mother.
It's important to educate yourself about the disease because everyone is affected differently.
MS, multiple sclerosis. The words mean many scars. They occur inside the central nervous system, the system of nerves carrying messages to and from the brain.
Your body's immune system, your white blood cells, instead of fighting off infections, attack your central nervous system, brain, the spinal cord, and the optic nerves. And they damage it. They damage it in a variety of ways, most commonly in damaging the myelin, which is the insulation around nerve fibers, but it also can damage the nerve fibers and the nerves themselves.
The effects of this nerve damage can be wide-ranging, from vision problems to lack of mobility. But most people with MS remain able to walk and have a normal or near-normal lifespan, living productive, active lives.
We have medicines now that impact positively on the disease, decrease the chances that you're going to have problems, and we have better medicines and easier to take medicines coming down the road. So my waiting room is filled with patients that look just as normal as everybody else.
A lot is known about what MS is, but it's not known why some people get it and others don't. No gene has been identified to pass the disease from one generation to the next. There are patterns, however. Women are twice as likely as men to get MS. It's more common among whites than those of African, Asian, or Hispanic backgrounds. It's less common in hot, sunny regions, and there's a possible link to early exposure to some viruses. But the disease is not contagious. Another important aspect of MS is that its course varies from person to person. So while we often think of people with MS as having obvious disabilities, sometimes they may be like Ken, whose co-workers had no clue he had MS until he told them.
You can't tell from the outside if we have any signs of the disease.
Ken is a communications professional for an international organization. He's had MS since 1990, but the effects of MS differ from person to person, and Ken has been fortunate in that the disease has not limited him severely. In fact, Ken was barely aware of it for years, coaching his daughter's soccer team and traveling around the world.
The illness was dormant for about 12 years. Dormant means I really didn't have any symptoms. I didn't feel anything. And if something came up, a very minor sensation, my hands, my feet, it was so inconsequential, I would ignore it and go on.
As we explained earlier, with MS, your immune system attacks the myelin that insulates the nerves and the nerves themselves. The symptoms you feel depend on which nerves are affected. But medicines today can slow the rate at which MS progresses, and they may reduce some of the symptoms you experience. Tanisha makes a living as an educator, providing guidance for college students. She's trained to notice when they're having problems, but recently she realized she had difficulties of her own.
I think I recognized the first symptoms about a year ago. I would get numbness in the hands and the feet, tingling. Typically when I would take a shower, my entire right or my left side, depending on which side, would go completely numb.
Most people experience their first symptoms of MS between the ages of 20 and 40. They might notice problems with their vision or muscle weakness in their hands and feet, difficulty with coordination and balance, or trouble walking.
The commonest things that individuals come in complaining of initially are unilateral, that is in one eye, visual loss, weakness, numbness and tingling, often in the legs, then rising up to parts of the body.
In addition, people with MS might experience tiredness, muscle stiffness, bladder problems, or a depressed mood. But because these symptoms can be signs of other problems, diagnosing MS can take time. Before she hit the big time, Terry Garr trained as a dancer. She got parts in the background, behind the stars.
And I danced behind all these people, and I look at them and think, I think I'm just as good as they are. Why am I not up there? So I started studying acting, and I studied for like 10 years, and then I got one job, and then I figured that was it. But it wasn't.
She worked hard for her success. But as her fame was growing, Terry was also searching for an answer to the symptoms she was experiencing.
I went to doctors, different doctors, and no one knew what it was.
It's not unusual for people to experience frustration before they're diagnosed with MS. For Christina, the process took years.
I was 15 or 16 years old when I started noticing symptoms that something was wrong. I had a lot of vertigo. I was very klutzy for no reason, lack of coordination. I was tired all the time. Those were the main problems in high school.
For a long while, Christina was told her problems might be in her head. Her mother and she knew that was not the answer.
They told me I was depressed, and my mother, who a mother knows her child very well. She's like, no, something's wrong with her. And then finally when I was 21, I had my first major symptom, which is a loss of vision in the left eye, which I got back. So.
Hello.
Hello.
Christina's MS was ultimately diagnosed and treated by a neurologist. That's a doctor who specializes in diseases of the nervous system.
And a neurologist would be the one to treat multiple sclerosis because multiple sclerosis is a disease of the central nervous system.
But even an expert doesn't make a diagnosis right away.
There is no single test for multiple sclerosis. We can't send a blood specimen or a urine specimen off to the lab and have it come back and say this is MS.
Let's have a look.
Okay.
Instead, there is a series of tests to rule out other conditions, check nerve function, examine eyes, and look for immune system activity in the fluid of the spine. Also, magnetic resonance imaging, an MRI, scans for damage to the brain or spinal cord. When Christina found out she had multiple sclerosis, her response was a mixture of concern and relief.
I was relieved to know that after all this time that I wasn't crazy, that my mom wasn't crazy, and I was really tempted to go back to all of my doctors and be like, see, I knew something was wrong.
It wasn't good news, but it was an answer to questions Christina had been asking for a long time. And it was the beginning of a journey as she began to find out more about managing the disease.
I feel that it is empowering and comforting to learn as much as you can about the illness that you have. And I'm one of those believers, knowledge is power.